Hey, this is Matt Vojek, and this is the Creating Business Podcast. Each episode, I sit down and talk to a guest from the creative industries of advertising and marketing about work they've done for a business and their thought process behind all their decisions. By digging deep into projects and the decisions made, we unearth new insights and ideas about creating amazing work that moves the needle for businesses. This is the Creating Business Podcast. The project we're going to be talking about today, I first saw in my Instagram feed probably about 6 months ago or so. This really nice branding and packaging done for a local company, Columbus company called Roosevelt Coffee. And the work was done by a company called Studio Freight. And it's just some of the best packaging work that I've honestly ever seen. It's so smartly done. They do things like print the package and then they have a bunch of different flavors, but to keep the costs down, let's print the same package and then they have a little square area that they slap a sticker on for one of the many different varieties of this coffee. So instead of getting these minimum orders of a bunch of different labels printed, they're keeping it simple and just replacing a sticker on them. So that was one thing that I noticed right away, and I thought that was super smart. And even just the sticker labels are so well designed and illustrated. And even the photos that they use to showcase this stuff, I may have said that already, but it just looks amazing. So before we go into the next segment here, I definitely check out the show notes, and I'll put a link in there so you can see what that work ended up being. And let's go to the show. All right, so I am here with Patrick Torres, and the project we are talking about today is it's a whole slew of different things that you did for Roosevelt Coffeehouse. So you can introduce yourself, and I'd love to hear your take on the work that you did for Roosevelt.
Sure. So my name is Patrick Torres. I'm a graphic designer and creative director. I run and operate Studio Freight here in Columbus, Ohio, with my business partner Aaron Marks. For Roosevelt, I think it's important, and I just have to make this distinction that it's Roosevelt Coffee Roasters that we did the work for. The coffee house is a separate entity altogether. So to give you the story here, we have to go back to when Kenny had started the coffee house back in 2015, I believe. So Kenny Sipes, founder, visionary of Roosevelt, had come up with this great idea of creating a coffee shop and sort of, I guess, largely a community around this idea of like great coffee and a place to have great conversations while also contributing to these issues that were really meaningful or meant a lot to him and the people that he surrounded himself with. So, at the core of it, it's about fighting injustice in all these different forms. And we've done a lot of work in the nonprofit space. So being able to contribute to things like that has always been part of our goal as a studio. Education has been another goal. So being able to collaborate with people that are like-minded in that way is something that's always been really exciting for us. We were in the studio space kind of behind the Roosevelt Coffeehouse, which meant that was our everyday go-to coffee shop. And we just really love the way that they put things together. Frank Wright, who's the head roaster there, head barista, he may have a better title than that now. I'm not sure. He's been there since the very beginning. He was originally one of the managers over at Stoff's here in town. And my first interaction with Frank was amazing. Coffee sort of has this reputation of being split down the middle. There's this dichotomy to it. Like, it's either Speedway 99-cent coffee or it's I have no idea how to pronounce that drink. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what this roast means or what this origin means, all of that stuff. So it's either overly simplified or overly complicated. And Frank really took the time to explain to me what I was talking about or what I thought I was talking about. Mm-hmm. And he elicited great information or great knowledge for me on what it is that I like. And he, I was honestly probably 15 to 20 minutes that we had a conversation about my taste profile and preferences. Really? And then he found like the perfect thing at Stoff's for me to take home. And it was amazing. Like it was almost like a sommelier or something with coffee, which was really incredible. So, having that past relationship with him, and then when he got brought into Roosevelt, it just made a lot of sense that we were gravitating towards what they were doing.
Yeah.
The ingredients that they use, the way that they source their coffee, they were maybe the only shop in town that was using Stumptown, and we love that coffee. We love the brand, all of that, and they use Snowville milk. And these sound like in the weeds details, but it makes a difference. That's the difference between, mochaccino from Starbucks or McDonald's and like a handcrafted beverage at Roosevelt Coffeehouse. So, we had started to build a relationship with these guys just by showing up every day, and they're naturally inquisitive, so they would ask, what do you do? You're graphic designers. We don't have a graphic designer. Would you be able to make this thing for me, or take a look at this, or rework this thing for us because we're not sure that this is the right format? And you just do little favors for people because you like them.
Yeah.
And that's not because like you're trying to get anything out of it. You just see good people doing good things and you want to help them.
So in the beginning then, so it didn't start off with like this big ask, right?
No. Okay. No. I mean, it was 3 years coming.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It took that long to arrive at the Roosevelt Coffee Roasters project. But during that time, he's seeing us do all of this work. We had a lot of client meetings inside of the Roosevelt Coffee House. We got to know their staff really well. So we had this really amazing relationship outside of the client designer aspect, right? Like it was just a good friendship. We were buying coffee, we were bringing people there, and it was just natural. So when the time came, they decided that they wanted to expand the offering of their business and said, we really love the products that we source, but we think that we want to go out on our own and start serving our own coffee. And that also has the potential to open up other revenue streams for them. It also extends the reach of their mission and the vision of the company. So it made a lot of sense, and they did a lot of planning on the back end. They worked with people from OSU to develop marketing tactics and recommendations and sort of a business plan. I don't know too much about the investment side of things, but I know that they worked with some really great folks here in town to get some seed money to get up and running, because the whole thing, at least on the Roosevelt Coffee House side of things, was nonprofit, but this one is a little bit different. And I don't know the details, so I don't want to speak out of turn on that. But so Kenny had asked us to be a part of those early conversations. In most cases, we would just kind of sit in on meetings and listen. And then if there was something that was relevant to what we were doing, we would kind of chime in. And I think in a lot of cases, marketing tends to forget the importance of strong brand, right? Like they just want to like create visibility. That's their job. That's the goal of marketing always, is to create that visibility and to let people know this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. But we know as a branding studio that it has to start with our work, which really starts with the client's work, right? So we take that and we figure out a way to present that in an effective way so marketing can do their job really well. So, 3 years after they opened, Kenny comes to us and says, obviously we want you to do this because we love your work. We've seen the stuff that you're doing. You obviously care about the coffee house and the mission here. We think it's a good fit. So we sit down and have a conversation, and we go, I'll spare you some of the details on some like the nitty gritty of the brand exercises, but the whole thing just starts with a great conversation. What are you trying to do, man? Like, are you trying to just sell coffee? Or are you trying to sell the mission, the vision? What's the most important aspect of this? And coffee is complicated because there are ethical issues that are involved. It's also a very crowded space, and it's something that's either done really well or done really poorly. And the pricing difference between those two is vast. So a lot of these early stage conversations were just about sort of defining the thing and building a vocabulary with the client, Kenny, and trying to figure out, okay, if we can do anything in the world, what is it that we don't want to do? We don't want to be this. We don't want to be that. This is the thing that we want to focus on. This is how we want it to come through in every single thing that we do. And in a lot of cases, if somebody's never been through a branding process, and this isn't limited to the Roosevelt project, but anything, they're eager to get to the visuals, and they get kind of fatigued by having too many conversations. But that stuff is so important. We were talking about being more like scientists than artists, and that's part of it, is doing your research, so you can make really well-informed decisions and how to make something great.
Yeah, that's like a that's like a big thing about, like, whenever I'm teaching, especially, like, I don't know, anytime that so I teach students motion graphics, and it's their first time getting into any sort of motion, anything, and I think their expectation kind of going into it is like, I just want to make some crazy looking stuff, and I can see how, like, annoyed they get whenever I start talking about pre-production and just, like, and strategy at the same time, because they're like, well, I just want to, like, make things, and it's like, it's just not, like, I don't know, like, yeah, you got to learn these things, but at the same time, it's never too early to learn that, like, there's a goal that you're trying to achieve with everything that you do. So, okay, so let's go to the point then where they kind of ask you to, you're kind of going through the story of this relationship, right?
Yeah.
And you get to this point where they're like, hey, we want you to kind of help us with this stuff. Now, at that point, are they like, okay, we want to do packaging and branding stuff? Like, I mean, what is it that they were asking for exactly?
Yeah, so I think people always go with what they think is the most obvious thing. So we need a logo and we need packaging for this project. But that stuff, there's a lot more to it, because, if you just have a logo, for example, you're just going to stick that on everything, and then eventually it just gets kind of stale and people forget it, But if you take the time to kind of build out what we call an Identities essential package, which is something that's specific to freight. But it essentially says, okay, we're going to give you a logo, a color palette, a type system, color system, and some secondary graphics. And those secondary graphics are supplemental to the identities. So you can use them in social posts, you can use them for merchandise, stickers, whatever it is. So it gives them we build in that flexibility for them from the very beginning. And sometimes that stuff is like patterns or iconography or spot illustrations, things like that. It just really depends on the project.
Yeah.
But that's typically like what people need to get up and running. But for this specific project, packaging was a big piece of it, because we knew that they were going to be importing, roasting, and distributing their own product. And we wanted to make sure that the conversations that we were having early on, the things that were very important to the Roosevelt and to their audience, were going to come through in everything that we did. So that was, we initially presented 3 concepts that we thought encapsulated that really well, and they gravitated towards one specifically, which is interesting that concept, the inspiration for that kind of came out of left field, right? We were looking at old ephemera, just old World Series baseball tickets.
That's cool.
And, I have a love for antiquity and old design from back in the day, because I'm just fascinated by the limitations that they had and what the printing processes were like at that time, and how you had to design for that, and with that in mind. And so that stuff, through our discovery phase, became clear that was something that was desired, right? We do these brand worksheets with our clients where we say, okay, should it be clean, or should it be kind of rough around the edges? Is it modern, or is it vintage? Like how do you want to think about this thing? Let's start to define some terms here. So we go through that exercise and we present 3 concepts, and they gravitated toward ultimately what you see out on the shelf today. I mean, it was a more rough version of that, with just some high-level conceptual stuff. Here's what we think the logo could be. Here's some of the secondary elements. Here's some packaging concepts. I mean, just like rough stuff. I mean, that stuff is still like very unrefined in terms of what information needs to exactly be there, or what the scale and stuff is going to be. So it's just a very easy way to present a concept to a client so they can visualize it. Because I think that most people outside of this world, like when I say world, I mean creative world, are not visual thinkers. Some are, definitely, but that's the world that we live in, and we're kind of in a silo, right? So we have to remember, you always need to explicitly illustrate these ideas for people. And so they saw the concept that they liked, and it was pretty much unanimous in that moment that this is what the Roosevelt Coffee Roasters identity should look like. So from there, we get feedback from them and what they think works and what they think doesn't work or isn't successful. And that whole time, we're always trying to say, like, what will the audience think of this? I know that you might not like this color, but what would Beth at the shop think?
Yeah.
So getting the input of the employees and getting the buy-in from the people that are going to be handling it every day was also important too. So we took the time to get good feedback from both the client and the people that are, substantial stakeholders in the brand, because they're the ones that are the face of it and they have to put their name into it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kenny's super creative. He's bringing all these really great ideas to the table the whole time, and we have to put that through the filter of like branding process and identity design process, and say like, okay, this is a great idea. We think we can fit it into the system by doing this. Some of that came through in the messaging that's in the identity, coffee and justice for all, right? Sort of this amalgamation of what they're doing as their mission and how they feel it should be distributed to people. So it's like this great equalizer. Everybody deserves to be treated fairly. Everybody deserves a great cup of coffee. We're providing that to you. Or roasted by us for you. It speaks to the tactile nature and the hands-on nature of the whole thing. So bringing little pieces like that through enable us to build, through the initial sensibility of the visuals. Then it starts to look like a system. It looks like we have something to say, and then we can start to put that into very real and tangible application. You make stickers and social media posts and websites and motion graphics out of that kind of stuff, because it's like it's this tangible thing that's visual, but it's also tied to an idea, so then it's stronger. So if you take a look at the packaging, that's an aspect of the project that we're especially proud of. Because we feel like it's so different. So we, in our initial research phase, we kind of put the best in class on the table and said, these are the people or the companies that we think that we can compete with in terms of quality and in terms of presentation. That was stuff like Stumptown. And, here locally, there's Backroom Roasters and Thunderkiss Coffee. And then there's also Tandem, which is not in Ohio, but there's a lot of great people putting out some really high quality products. So we were kind of taking cues from that and saying, like, it can't be too complicated. It needs to be different within the category. So if it's on the shelf next to something as high quality as Stumptown, can it compete? So that requires us to go out and do a lot of primary research. I mean, we're literally going to stores and coffee shops and asking people what they think about coffee and how they make those decisions. And Aaron, my business partner, and I, we're super passionate about coffee. We both travel a lot. So in any given year, we spend over $2,000 a piece on coffee.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. We're so caffeinated. It's ridiculous. That's why all the lines are rough on our illustrations, because we're shaking. In all seriousness, no, like we're fortunate enough to be able to travel around and we document all of that stuff. So we know the space quite well. And, we think we have a good eye for what quality looks like, and we want to make sure that is brought through in the work that we do.
Yeah,
especially in that space.
So, kind of going back a little bit. So, how important do you think it is to be that familiar with something? Like, I mean, you're talking about different, all these different kinds of coffee. Like, I don't know anything about coffee. Mm-hmm. Like I know what you did looks great, but I don't know anything about coffee. I guess. Yeah, how important of a role do you think that plays in kind of any project? Maybe not just this one, but all of them.
So we kind of have this motto of when we approach a project that we need to approach it with ignorance, but with our expertise in mind, right? Yeah. So we try to pretend like we don't know anything about it, because you have to assume that the common denominator is lack of knowledge, and even in some cases lack of interest. So what is the mid ground between that and somebody who knows exactly what they're looking for when they pick up a package of third wave minded coffee, right? So we really had to think with two audiences in mind, the connoisseur and just the person who just needs a pound of coffee to take home, or maybe they're buying it for a gift. And I think that's the balance that we tried to strike with that project, that it's something that's attractive and that you could be not embarrassed to pick up and kind of display on your shelf at home or your counter at home or in your shop, but also that information about the sourcing and the origin, the notes and things like that are available to those who are looking for it as well. So I don't think that you have to be an expert in any sort of industry to be able to do good work within design. I think that what you have to have is passion and curiosity and the willingness to dig into something. That's actually one of the things that I love about my job the most, is that it provides a license for me to infiltrate other worlds. And that's kind of borrowing from Michael Beirut from Pentagram, right? Yeah. Like he said, I found myself in architecture and in education and all these spaces I had no right or business being in. And so when I heard him say that, I was like, oh, we can do that. Like we can get into coffee, we can get into tech, we can, and I have no interest in building a coffee company or a tech company, but I can be a part of it because there are things about those things that I love. And I think that's pretty clear if you look at our portfolio, like we work with insurance companies, consumer goods, food and beverage, tourism, like it's just everywhere because we just love so much. We find inspiration in those places.
Yeah. So, all right, so let's go to the point now where, they're going to do packaging. Now, you're a relatively young company still, and yeah. I can't imagine that every single project you do is related to packaging. Like, so how do you go about doing that? Like, did they already have like the bags, and then they just say, hey, here's the bags, we need to print on these? Or I guess at what point, what did you do to kind of figure that stuff out?
So the client, Kenny and Frank, the clients, they spend a lot of time going to coffee conferences and things like that, and they knew that this was approaching like the need for this. So they would go out and get samples from some of these trade shows, and we would look at the distribution marks on the bottom of the bags from other companies and just say, okay, let's just do some homework here and kind of see what the options are. And a lot of that stuff it usually works one of two ways. Like it's either completely custom or it's just a craft bag that you're throwing a sticker on. Yeah. So we decided to go the more custom route, which meant that the bags were actually built for that project, and which means that the minimum quantities are super high. Yeah. Like minimum quantities of 25,000, which means that your spelling better be right. Yeah. You know what I mean?
For sure.
We did printing on the bag, and then there's a label that goes on that we can change things out with. So, we've done a little bit of packaging in the past, but nothing on this scale. I mean, that's a pretty big financial commitment for them. So there was a lot of questions. There was a lot of emails flying around, and a lot of being cautious about how we're approaching things and the decisions that we're making. And I think, we have a lot of experience working in print. So we know a lot of the production lead times and what it takes to actually get something like that accomplished. So I think that stuff translates really well, because working with die lines and actually getting a printer on the phone and not like a sales rep is probably the biggest challenge because they put people between the designer and the printer for some reason. I think that they think that it's good customer service, but I just want to talk to the printer so I can tell them that this needs 25% less magenta. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Little things like that. So navigating it was probably the biggest challenge of the project because it was such a big investment for them. We wanted to make sure that we got that right. If it's going to take them a year to get through 25,000 bags, I think they're actually going to do better than that. It's got to be valuable to them. It's got to be worth it to them. So, carefully.
I think one of the reasons that I love this project so much, that packaging so much, is that so you have the printed bag and then you are putting the labels on them, because how many different kinds of coffee are there?
I think there's over 10. I mean, it basically boils down to origin. I think there are 12 origins, and then there are different farms within each country of origin. So that's the system, right? Like each country has its own animal and color, and then the farm gets swapped out depending. And then there are also like limited run coffees as well. Like they have like a holiday roast or like a collaboration roast with like another company or something like that.
I guess kind of diving a little bit even deeper is like I guess how smart it is in just how much money you were able to save by not doing a minimum order of like 10 different designs, but instead saving, I don't know how much money. I had to have been saving at least thousands of dollars by just having the one print and putting the labels on there. I don't know. Like I've even seen people taking those labels off now and putting them on their laptops. I'm not sure if you've seen that too.
Yeah, that's super fun. We love seeing that.
Yeah, I think it's super cool.
Funny anecdote about that. We were being asked to come in and have a conversation around a new project, right, there for a brand and a website. And so we show up. This is at a incubator here in town. You probably know which one I'm talking about. It was at an incubator here in town, and we go in, and there it is. The Roosevelt sticker is on the client's computer. That's so cool. We knew that we had good leverage.
Yeah.
Because we could just say, we did that.
Did you bring it up immediately, or did you wait till like that time?
Oh yeah, we totally brought that up. We totally brought that up immediately. It's just like, that stuff is great because you see that people love the thing that you made, and that's the best feeling, right? That the work that you're making is not only doing well for the client, but also it's something that people can get behind. So when you see your stuff all over people's, their bags or their cars and laptops and stuff, it's just like, it kind of confirms that the decisions that you made were successful, and that's a point that you can make when you're sitting down with like that person, for example, like, you already love our work. Like, at least it looks like it, like that's a great place to start with somebody.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously it's difficult to accomplish something like this by yourself. I guess like at what point and what kind of people did you have to get to help you through this process to have that end result that you guys got?
Yeah, so I think that there's a tendency for anybody to look at a design studio or maybe even Freight specifically and see like, oh, it's you and Aaron doing everything. And that's not the case. A lot of times on these projects, it requires a lot of hands and a lot of heads and a lot of hearts, right? So, there's also sometimes when people want a very specific aesthetic and maybe that's not something that Aaron or I do, or that's not our focus, right? Like, I think the thing that Freight is really good at is designing the system, and we can make things look great visually as well. But, for something as specific like these labels, we knew that we wanted to bring in some collaborators on that. So, for the labels, for example, that was the part where you can see the collaboration aspect the most clear is the animals that are assigned to each bag, right? So each country of origin has its own animal, and that's a way for people to identify the roast. But it also is like a differentiating factor on the shelf as well. We saw a lot of people doing very similar things, like they use the coffee plant almost always, or they'll put like the silhouette of the country on there, or they'll use some sort of landmark to say like, this is an African coffee, or this is a Hawaiian Kona or whatever. And so that was something that we saw as a completely unique opportunity. What if we took the national animal from, something that country is proud of, and then, that's a cool way to differentiate each of the origins, but also like the application of that is great too, because somebody can say that they really love the condor, they really love the lion stuff. And then like, an idea has legs when you can just start dreaming, and the client starts dreaming up like touch points for that to be applied to. Then you're kind of in the right, on the right side of town, I guess. So for that we this is so funny. We have an intern. His name is Alan Alanis. He's a killer illustration major at CCAD, and we kind of put this kid through hell. You know what I mean? Like we really make him work, and he's shown such great progress over the last year, and he was kind of around when we were doing this project, and we said, okay, we're going to do animals for each of the origins. He really loved that idea, and we said, we need you to explore visual styles, like how should this thing be built? Or is it more painterly? Is it outlines? What is it? And so he brought all these ideas to the table, and he must have conceptualized 30 different styles. And we finally landed on something. We said, okay, great, this is perfect. But it needs to work in a system. So if you look on the packaging itself, it's, the animal is just within a square. But we have everything from a rhino to a quetzal, which is a bird that's like...
A quetzal?
Quetzal, yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is maybe the size of like a hummingbird. They're tiny. So that scale is different. So how do you get those two animals in the same constraint, right? So that's where we hired Joshua Minnick, who's a illustrator and designer, originally from Ohio. He's now out in Portland doing some great stuff out there. Josh is great. He's sort of this illustration design like master, like the things that you're seeing on the Roosevelt packaging, like 2 or 3 revisions, maybe tops. I mean, just the lines that this guy is putting down are so clean. Like, he doesn't thumbnail. He doesn't need to do that. He can just draw what you see. So we work with Josh on all of those animals to make sure that they're consistent, that they all look like they're coming from the right place. And, building illustration for like a website header or like a spot illustration for a magazine is a lot different than trying to fit it in this very rigid system that we've created. So that label is called a title block. It's like what you would see on blueprints. And that's a common way to sort of break up information and make it modular, so you can kind of move it around if you want to reprioritize something. But with these labels specifically, it was always an animal and profile. And the line weight was always the same, and the attitude of the animal matters, right? Like, it can't look too angry, it can't look too passive, it can't look too cute, it can't look too realistic. Like, really what you're doing, like I mentioned earlier, where if you can do anything, what are the limitations that you're starting to build for yourself on this? And that's how you build cohesion and consistency through a system, right? It's like, it's always this, it's never that. So as we're building these things out and they're getting new origins, we're able to act on these illustrations pretty quickly. So it's like, here are 5 new origins, here are the 5 animals that we've all decided on, and we can get those done in a week. So they can get, theoretically, new round of labels up and out the door within a week because the system is efficient. And part of that goes to like how we went about applying the labels to the bags. You mentioned like printing on the bags and then having the labels done separately. That saves a lot of money in the long run, because otherwise you're ordering these minimum quantities of these massive runs, and then what happens if that coffee doesn't sell, or you need to take it off the shelf, because coffee is very seasonal. Like, only certain origins are available at certain times of the year, so you'll see them kind of come and go. So we wanted the illustration process and the production process to be as easy for the client as possible, which meant like a lot of internal back and forth. But after all, it's all said and done, it's fast for us to act on these things. And I think in a way that you're probably not going to see at a larger agency, right? Or even like maybe even like a larger studio, because we're super lean. Like, you want a new round of labels? What are the animals? We'll send out the illustrations to Josh, give us the tasting notes, and we can have these out the door. Yeah. It's quick. Yeah. And that's by design. Yeah. I mean, it is and it isn't, though, because obviously it's based on that relationship that you guys have started years ago, right? Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's so much to it, but now it's like a quick thing. Now it is, yeah. I always think about that with like some of the projects that I do for certain clients, where it's like maybe we do like a certain type of video, like a certain like style. Like, maybe at first it actually took us like a while, maybe like a month, but now like we can get something done in like 3 to 4 days, because we know it. Like, we know it so well that you can kind of do it much faster, to the point where it almost makes you feel bad if you're charging the same, Sure. But like, at the same time, I guess it's keeping that thing in mind, where it's like I can't remember the quote exactly, but I don't think this is right, but like, I tried to look this up, but it was like something like Henry Ford had somebody come and fix his the heating machine thing at one of his plants, and this guy came, and apparently they were trying to get it fixed for like months, and nobody could do it. And this guy like walks in there, and within like 30 minutes, he like hits a part of it with a wrench or something like that. All of a sudden, the thing just kicks on and starts working. Again, I don't think this story's true at all, but I've heard it several times. So, so the guy comes down off the ladder and greets Henry Ford and gives him the invoice, and he's like, "Oh my God, this is like a ridiculous amount of money. It took you like 2 seconds just to like hit the right, like hit the vent with your wrench." And he's like, "Actually, it took me years of experience to just know where to hit the vent to make the damn thing work." Yeah. But like, I always kind of love hearing that kind of stuff, where obviously the more you do something, the more efficient you get at it. And to me, that's where the real value is. Absolutely, yeah. So is there anything else you want to add to that real quick? No, just to kind of wrap up. that's why we do all that work on the front end. And I think that when people go through that process, they finally realize that it's valuable to learn and to build these systems. And so when you need to make a decision, or your marketing team needs to make a decision, the precedent is already set, not just for quality, but in terms of like the actual process. The same thing is true of any business. When if someone's coming in to buy something, you expect them to do A, B, C, and D, and then we do X, Y, Z to get them out the door. Like that process is something that we give to people when we're designing a system for them, or in that packaging or a website or whatever, because it's not just the end result. It's not like the stickers and the T-shirts and stuff. Like that's what people see, but ultimately, it's like what it takes to make this stuff at the quality at which it deserves to be presented. Like all of those things are part of the value as well.
Yeah. So kind of taking another step back here, going through this project for you, like at what point did you, I mean, maybe you haven't still, but like at what point do you realize that you're onto something here? Like you're onto something special, a little bit more special than maybe something else?
I think it really has to do with how people react to it. Mm-hmm. More than anything, like that we were kind of talking about earlier, the validation through building something that people really love to share, because we like to think that all of the work that we put out is of the same quality. We don't, a $10,000 logo is going to look as good as a $1,000 logo, and that spectrum varies depending on what the client is capable of paying. But we put that same amount of effort into it because there's one type of quality that comes out of the studio only. That will be how it always is, because ultimately our name goes on that stuff too. Yeah. So we have to make things that matter and that will help procure more work in the future for us and a better reputation each time. Can we cuss on here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we have this thing that we've sort of arrived at recently when we're pitching larger companies, where we say, they might say, we don't know if you can do this work. And we say, well, we have a track record of working with these other large companies, and we've also increased profitability here, blah, 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 with our work and, all that kind of ROI stuff. But I think something that's really powerful and maybe a little bit more emotional that we've arrived at is that everything we do fucking matters, because we're trying to build this business. So I promise you that I want to make you money. The best decision I could ever make as an entrepreneur is to make you rich, because that shows other people that my work is valuable and that it's been proven. So I'm just trying to make one person rich so other people will see that I can make them rich too, and then they'll pay me money.
Dude, that's it right there. Like I do the exact same thing. Like whenever I rebranded my company, it was like, it's about that. Like, it's about like, we do videos, animation, stuff like that, but like,
it's just the output.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, I guess one is knowing what that problem is that you're trying to solve. And like, how can I make you a ton of money?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. To me, that's just like, I don't know, that's where it's at. Like,
that's what we're doing, right? Yeah. Like, this is not art where I'm trying to show you how I feel about this coffee by putting, this label on here or something. Like, I'm trying to get somebody interested enough to pay you lots of money to drink your thing. Yeah. And I've told people that directly. I told Kenny that. I was like, it would be the best decision I ever made for this company to blow this company up in some way. Mm-hmm. Of course, like that's not the focus though, right? Like the focus is, and the responsibility is good work that performs well for what they're trying to do and that is connecting with their audience. Yeah. So if you can see those things kind of come together, I think that's how we judge success. I mean, there are pieces that we put out that we're especially proud of, or like I can see that I pushed myself, and like I did this poster for Wolf's Ridge last year. It was like one of the most technical things I'd ever done.
Yeah, the one with the building.
That's right, yeah. And that poster sold out in like an hour of being up. And like that's an awesome feeling. And then people send me pictures of it in their living room, or the owner of Wolf's Ridge has it in his living room, and that's a huge compliment. Won an award and stuff like that. And that's cool, but like the owner has that in his living room. Like that says that that means something to him. So when people take it and they run with it, that's always my benchmark for knowing that I had something special. In terms of knowing that early on in like the process, it's tough because like there's this there's this idea that if you like something too much, it might not be good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I experienced that. I'm like, oh, I'm really excited about this idea. And then you put it out there and people don't like it. And you're like, oh, maybe I'm not good at deciding that.
No,
you know?
I totally get that. A lot of times for me, it is like that opposite thing where you're like, oh man, this is good.
Yeah.
This is real good. I'm gonna put this in some award shows. I'm definitely gonna win. And then you don't win anything. And
Nothing.
Like, oh man.
Doesn't even place.
Like maybe it wasn't even that good. Like, I don't know, man.
But then you start to ask other questions, though. I think that's important because you ask other questions like, did I not explain this well?
Yeah.
You know, could I have presented this information to somebody better?
Yeah.
We have a project like that. I'm not going to tell you which one it is in our portfolio.
Okay.
And I just we think it's just groundbreaking thinking.
Yeah.
And nobody, I don't think, gets it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, is it too complicated or is it just not that impressive? I don't even know. You know, we've tried to get feedback from people on it, but it's tough because people don't want to tell you your stuff is no good. You know,
it's true. Most of the time for me, it's usually when it's time to present it to the client, where it's like, oh my god, this is it. I can explain every little decision on this. There is no point of argument here.
Mm-hmm.
This is good. I'm so ready for this. And then you show them, and they're like, no, it's not really exactly what we had in mind. And it's like, but
yeah.
But this is so well thought out. I don't know. But I'm not a big fan of the whole clients from hell thing and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm always if you hate your clients, then
it's your fault.
Yeah, exactly. It's your fault either A, for taking them on, or B, because you led them down some path.
For sure.
What I mean? But I guess for me, it's whenever those things happen, it's man, how do I change the process to be that they say yes to this every single time?
That's right.
You know?
That's exactly right.
I don't know. I guess it is the same thing for when you enter into award shows and don't win or whatever. Whenever you think this thing's better than what it is, it's okay, well, now, I don't know. I guess two things there. One, you're okay, well, people, nobody wants to say maybe it's just not as good as some of the other stuff.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that's fine, but I think at a certain point, it's not. This work isn't that personal. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I can't speak for you, obviously, but for me, it's there's certain elements that may have been personal to me, but I'm not gonna be mad if somebody's I don't like it. I don't know.
It takes a lot longer. It took a lot longer for me to be able to let that go because they tell you that day one in school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Detach yourself from the work, but that's it's impossible because you spend so much time with it. You know what I mean? But I think a better way to say that is you need to make a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you make a lot of stuff, you won't be nearly as attached to it when somebody chooses, whatever concept. You're okay, that's the one we're going with. I'm just going to make it better.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Then you're just there to do a job. But I think that when you put all of your effort and your heart and your emotion into one concept and then somebody looks at it and they're, are you joking? Yeah. Is this it? Mm-hmm. Of course you're going to be destroyed by that, but if you do 100, if you do 50, if you do 25, it's just pick something, please. You know what I mean? There's a moment where you detach.
I think it's a percentage game. Where early on when you're man, that's this one project was 10% of my career.
Yeah, for sure.
But then when you get to the point where it's this is 0.2% of my career, I don't really care that much.
But also over that time, you've also gotten faster and better, and you know how to manage the relationship better too. So you're just a better creative person, creative business person by the time you get there too. So I think it's it's both of those things.
For sure. So going a little bit forward from that now, I guess how have things changed for you and your process after this project?
Yeah, that's a good question.
One that you were not prepared for.
Ooh.
And I'll talk for just a second here to give you some time.
No, it's okay. I'd rather talk it out. So
all right, cool.
With Freight, the whole thing is very iterative. So we've had over 60 clients since we started Freight 2 years ago. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of clients. That's a lot of proposals. It's a lot of emails. So I think, and it's a lot of personalities, you know what I mean? Because you're dealing with typically more than one person with every project, right? Stakeholders, all that.
Yeah.
So, as we're building our proposal process, our pricing models, our design process, we're trying to make it as easy and simple for the person that's sitting at that table with us as possible. And every project brings a unique set of challenges. So for the Roosevelt project, it was, okay, packaging, identity, promotion, and then also managing all of the complexity behind that stuff, because, you know, we also manage the production for a lot of the materials that were produced, so a lot of the stickers and t-shirts and things like that. So we're handling a lot of relationships. And I think the biggest thing to come out of that, as well as collaborations, you know, with like photographers and videographers and you know, illustrators and interns and things like that. I mean, you're really building a team. So I think the biggest thing that we took from that project was, you know, managing expectations of not only the client and the collaborators, but also on the production side of things too. And just making sure that things are very clear for people always, and giving them what they need. In a lot of ways, I think that's what good creative leadership is about. And as the creative director, that's my responsibility, is to make sure that everybody on the client side, on the production side, on the design side, that everybody has exactly what they need to execute on their job really well. So it's not like we weren't doing those things before. It's just you learn more about all of that stuff every time you do it. And the Roosevelt was a great example of, you know, you have to perform here because a lot of eyes are on this project. And if you do well here, it could mean good things for you. And it has meant good things for us. It was easily one of the best decisions we had ever made to collaborate with the Roosevelt on that project, because it gets a lot of attention and people are behind it, and we're super proud.
Nice. So I guess, is there anything else that you'd like to add about like anything throughout the project that maybe you didn't cover?
Yeah, so I think moving forward, you know, even after that, you know, we're still doing work with the Roosevelt, and they have all of these great things sort of lined up, and they've brought some new people to the table in terms of like how they actually plan on expanding this thing. Like, you know, they're opening up a second location in the Gravity Project down here in Franklinton, and you know, we just love seeing people take the things that we make and do more with it, because that's what it's for. You know, we don't expect people to pay us to do their thing forever, you know, and in a lot of cases, that's not what happens. You know, we build out the system for you to go and do your thing. So, you know, like we definitely want to contribute to more projects like that, especially when it means so much to the people that are involved and the impact that ultimately has. And, you know, and I think there's more coffee in our future. We'll see.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So then the final question is, where can people find out more about you?
So Instagram and, well, for me, Instagram, patrick.torres_, I think is what it is. And then at studio.freight, and then also studiofreight.com, where you can see the latest work.
Nice. Thanks, man. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. All right. So that was amazing. Always a good time talking to Patrick. Patrick was actually a student of mine a few years back. He's already started his company. At the time, he was in my motion graphics class. And I knew, even while he was in that class, that he was going to do some really great work. The attention to detail that he spent in things was definitely some foreshadowing of what his future has in store. And I'm super excited to see the work that him and the rest of Studio Freight does, kind of moving forward. They're here. That, you know, they started off as a small company, and they've been growing in both employees and size and some of the clients that they're working with, and it's just been super fun to watch, especially from that teacher perspective. So as a recap, just kind of going over a few of the important things that I wanted to talk about from that conversation. Probably the biggest one being that client designer or client creative relationship. And sometimes it's not as simple as like they call you up and then you do this work. Sometimes it is, I met somebody like 8 years ago, and then they introduced me to this person, and then we started talking, we became friends, and then 3 years after that, we made a little thing for them. And then all of a sudden, now we're working on this giant thing, this giant rebrand package for them. more often than not, I feel like with smaller companies, that is the story, where it's, like I said, it's not just being handed a statement of work and then you just kind of go from there. It's about creating and cultivating a relationship. And I don't know, like it's especially good whenever both people are really good at a certain thing, and it makes it easy for somebody to make that decision of who they're going to go to whenever they need a certain thing. And that relationship that they have, and the things that Patrick was saying that he learned from that relationship, I think is just super important, where it's the stuff that he knows about coffee. Well, like, most people don't know all those details about coffee, and most people don't care. Most people shouldn't care, honestly. As that's speaking from somebody that doesn't drink coffee. But when you go into creating something, having a solid framework to build around, having answers to things, and having information about something lets you make the creativity happen. Like, you have to kind of build the walls before you can kind of create from it. And the more solid the structure is, which is this information, these questions, the more solid that structure is, the better that creative work is going to turn out to be. And I think that there is absolutely a correlation between that relationship that they had and that final output of this work. That idea that as designers, as creatives, as makers for other people, our goal is to help other people, maybe not necessarily be rich all the time, but like they should definitely succeed. So your goal is to help them. And as Patrick said, like, his goal is to help people get rich. In that context, that succeeding is getting rich. And I think that's just an amazing way to look at it. And I think that every company should look at things that way, because, if your goal is to help them get rich, well, then you're going to make the decisions that it takes to be a massive return on their investment, because nobody goes out and hires a creative person with the expectation that they're going to lose money, right? No, I mean, the same reason that you go out and you have housework done. It's to increase the value of your house. Well, and to probably make it more comfortable for you to live, but ultimately, you're not expecting to just put that money in and not get anything back. Those are the kind of things that people get really upset about, like things like a roof, Anyway, this isn't a home improvement podcast. Maybe I'll start another one. We'll see. Anyway, so I think that those are the two big things that I think I took away from this conversation. And I think it's just important to, continuing from before, it's important to understand what the expectations are for anybody that you work for, to know what their goals are, and to try to give them a result that's way beyond even their goal. And I think that's our job as creatives, is to meet those goals, to meet and exceed those goals as best we can with the knowledge and talents that we have. And I guess the best part is that if you win, if you do it, if you meet their goal, if you exceed their goal, you're going to have a great career in this industry. And it's really that simple. You can make the best looking work in the world, and you can still struggle to make ends meet. The biggest thing is to help people where it helps most, and that's their wallet, Maybe as crude as that kind of sounds, I think it's super important to think about those things. So that's all I have here. Hope you like the show. If you like it, if you could just leave a review of some sort, preferably not 1 star, but tell your friends, share it, post it. I don't really care. Again, only if you like it. If you don't, then just completely ignore I even said this. Actually, if you didn't like it, you're probably not even listening still, so please leave a good review on iTunes. We're also on Stitcher and a bunch of other things. As a new podcast, still trying to figure out where things need to be, but anyway, so that's all I have, and bye.